My name is Rabbi Shmuley Boteach, and I'm the executive director of This World, the Jewish Values Network. Now, what are Jewish values? The world kind of knows Christian values, it knows Muslim values, it knows atheist values, agnostic values. Jewish values are values that are focused on this world, which is why we called our organization This World. It's not focused on getting you into heaven, it's focused on making heaven here on earth. Jewish values focus on passionate marriages filled with great intimacy, great sex lives, emotional intimacy, closeness, connection. Many religions have shied away from the centrality of sex in marriage. Judaism embraces it, encourages it. You're not supposed to be best friends primarily, you're supposed to be lovers. Jewish values focuses on raising inspired children. We have a problem here in America that our kids are becoming more self-centered, more narcissistic. We need a year of national service in the United States, the way Israel has mandatory military service or mandatory national service. I have a daughter who's currently serving in the IDF. She's a good American girl who made Aliyah, and she found, as soon as she went to Hebrew University as a good religious Dati girl, that she had to give back to the country, her adopted country, the Jewish state. And we're very proud of her service in the IDF. But American kids also need to learn altruism, that you go through 4 years of high school, and before you go to college, maybe before you continue just focusing on me, 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 that you have to focus on the other. Jewish values is focused on education, not just to get a degree, not just to get a job, but education to be enlightened, to be an inquisitive, curious human being who finds wonder and awe in God's world, in the universe. I counsel marriages. So many marriages die the death of boredom. It's where you live with someone day in and day out, and you feel you know them so well that there's nothing left to explore, to discover. We Jews abnegate that feeling of boredom by really being education focused. I feel that in America, education today is really about getting, landing a job at Goldman Sachs, when really it's supposed to be about becoming a curious individual. Jewish values are about promoting sacred time over sacred space, meaning the world really appreciates space, property, objects that we own. We accumulate wealth. Sometimes you feel as if all human life has been reduced to a game of accumulation, and whoever accumulates the most by the end of their life has won, if you hit the Forbes 400 list. Judaism says that life is about accumulating special moments, precious moments. We actually expend money, property, to acquire special moments. We spend money on big Shabbat dinners in order to have hospitality. Here in this house, thank God, we have many, many people who join us every Shabbat dinner. We want to create in our home, for our children to witness every Friday night, the tent of Abraham. Abraham's tent that had a roof, but it had no doors. It was not built to lock people out, only to welcome people in. So I think that Jewish values has so much healing to bring to the world, and that's what I'm focused on. Well, the Jewish people have to be a light unto the nations. And let me tell you how important it is for we, the Jews, to share our wisdom and our light with the nations of the world. Here's just one practical example. The Dalai Lama is one of the most respected people in the world. Now, he represents 6 million Tibetan Buddhists. They're up against 1.3 billion Chinese. How much money, how much economic power does the Dalai Lama have? Nothing, zero. I don't know that Tibet has any natural resources or oil, or they're famous for technology. So why does the world continue to promote the Dalai Lama, very often at China's expense? Why does the world support this guy who leads 6 million people against the economic interests of 1.3 billion people? You would think that the world would always choose China, but they don't. The reason? Because the people in the West feel that the Dalai Lama has given them something essential. He's given them spirituality. He's helped them to free themselves, liberate themselves from the incarceration of the ego. And they're grateful to him. They want to fight for him. They want to stand up for him, support him. Now, Israel's in a very similar situation. 6 million Jews up against, let's say, 1 billion Muslims. Many Muslims are friends of the Jewish people, but many are not. And the world looks at the 6 million Jews in Israel, and it says, should we really choose the interests of 6 million people over 1 billion? Let's side with the Arabs. They have a lot of oil. Why don't they have the same approach as they do with the Dalai Lama? Support the Jewish people. Support the party that represents democracy and women's rights. Israel's is easily the only country in the Middle East where gay men and women can march openly in the streets of Tel Aviv or even Yerushalayim without being mowed down by machine guns. We know what Hamas does to gay men. They shoot them as collaborators, or what they do to women who have boyfriends. They often murder them, their brothers, in honor killings. These are horrific things. So how is it that the world doesn't support Israel? The world doesn't quite get Israel. they don't feel that the Jewish people are making the same spiritual contribution. When people think about the Jewish people, they often think about people who are successful. People who've mastered business, mastered commerce. Now that's nice that we have business acumen, that's wonderful. May God give us more success because we Jews do such good things with our success. We're amazingly philanthropic, amazingly charitable. But I want us to be known primarily as the great spiritual light of the world, which is what our biblical mandate is. Or goyim netaticha, that God made us to be a light unto the nation. So that's why this is so important. If we could portray Israel as a great light of democracy, freedom, human rights, spiritual teachings, values to the world, then the whole world will have an interest in its preservation and in security. And that's what I'm focused on. There's two ways to respond to the question of why Israel is experiencing global delegitimization and why people don't get it, the truth of the facts on the ground. One explanation is the easy one. They're anti-Semites. They've hated us for 2,000 years, according to Benjamin Netanyahu's father, Ben Sion, 1,000 years even before then. But they hate us till today. I don't know, because I don't know the hearts of men. I feel that explanation is too convenient. It absolves us of any responsibility to promote Israel's message. I'm opposed to that explanation because it's too convenient. It's too easy for us to say it's not our fault. Why are we misunderstood? Because people hate us. I believe the job of a communicator is to communicate. And if we're failing to deliver our message, we have to look at ourselves. I think that Israel's hasbara, its explanations to the world, its apologists, I think we've all failed. And we failed because we've been on the defensive. We have continually said, when attacked, Israel's an abuser of human rights. No, we're not. Look, we treat people well. We need to demonstrate two things. Number one, what Israel represents. Why are we responding to every little charge when we really have to show that Israel is this great light of values, of democracy, liberty, to the entire world? We have to have a much more coherent, much larger message. And it can't be getting into the weeds of responding to every little charge. You have to have the great light of what this country represents. You think America isn't accused of human rights abuses in places like Afghanistan and Iraq? But the world knows that the United States is the great defender of liberty. And if it wasn't, why does everyone want to come and live here? If it's not true that the United States is a great bastion of liberty, democracy, freedom of press, why is it that every day our newspapers expose things that are going on here that in other countries editors would be thrown in jail for? It's not a perfect country, the United States, but it's a country whose values are so righteous. And Israel has those values and more, because America gets its values from the Hebrew Bible, which the Jews brought to the world. Why isn't that our message? Israel is the shining beacon of values, family, freedom, liberty, justice, education, charity, in the Middle East and to the world. And that has to be our message. And we have to hammer that message home, that the Jewish people's survival and flourishing is essential to the moral well-being of the nations of the world. The Jewish people taught the world the Ten Commandments, which today we call morality. We gave the world God. Even though today people call him Jesus Christ or Allah, we gave the world God. And God is a very important idea because it means that we're all brothers and sisters. It means no matter how much an Arab leader in Egypt may call us the descendants of monkeys and pigs, he's wrong. Because his own Quran, based on our Torah, says that every human being is created in the image of God. So sorry, you may hate the Jews, but we are your brothers. Get used to it. And kol tumei achicha tzokim elai min adama. And you can't allow the blood of your brothers, of the Jews, to cry out from the ground. Stop trying to kill us. We are your brothers, for God's sake. Stop making these artificial divisions. They are not only disgusting, but they contravene the Quran. They're against your religion. I'm a great believer that those Jews who disparage Islam and call it a religion of murder and war, I think that's terrible that they say that. We have to honor and respect Islam. We have to use Islam to show the Muslims that they are betraying their religion when they speak of hatred. That they are betraying the Prophet Muhammad when they talk about subjugating the Jews, destroying the Jews. They are betraying their own faith. Why are we making it easier for them when they speak about annihilating the Jews like Ahmadinejad does? Why do we make it easier to say, he's right, because Islam says you're supposed to kill all the Jews? It's not true at all. We're supposed to say Ahmadinejad is a religious fraud. What a hypocrite. That man is about as religious as the world's biggest atheist. He's a total charlatan because he is betraying the principles of Islam. And we need to tell Muslims of the world, you should spit out Ahmadinejad. You should be kicking Ahmadinejad out. You should be saying, you are the worst ambassador for Islam. You're a killer. You're a murderer. You killed Muslims in the streets of Tehran in 2009. You are an abomination. Instead, we come along and attack Islam and make it easy for him. The hatred that Ahmadinejad spews is in the Quran, so he's a good Muslim. He's a terrible Muslim. He's the worst Muslim. Islam would never condone this. And we, the Jews, have given Christianity its values. We, the Jews, have given Islam its values. Christianity and Islam are based and built on Judaism. They don't deny that. It's true. If you open any Christian Bible, 3/4 of it is the Hebrew Bible. They call it the Old Testament, which would imply that it's kind of outdated. I call it the Hebrew Bible. It's just as much enforced today as it was in the times of Jesus. I just wrote a book called Kosher Jesus, demonstrating that everything Jesus taught is found in the Torah. Jesus was a Pharisaic, Jewish, educated rabbi who taught great Jewish truths to the world. Now, his image was distorted later, according to our tradition. We reject his divinity, we reject his messiahship. I don't think he believed in those things either. That's what the book says. But it makes no difference. Even if Christians embrace that, they still can trace the spiritual origins of Christianity back to Judaism. And Islam is the same. The Prophet Muhammad studied Judaism. There's a tradition that he wanted to convert to Judaism. But whatever that truth is, the fact is he built the Islamic God, Allah, on the Jewish God of Kel. And the one indivisible God who cannot be portrayed, not in an image. I mean, you go to a mosque and there's only, all the art is words. They won't even portray, I mean, we Jews are against 3-dimensional images like sculpture. Muslims take it even further. They are against 2-dimensional images like painting. So they have a very pure form of monotheism, and it's based on Judaism. It's based on the Torah. And we need to demonstrate that the Jewish people and the State of Israel as the supreme embodiment of Jewish values, are a great light to the world. Oh, there's no question Israel blew the media battle. Israel's main war today is not primarily a war of bullets and bombs. Of course it is a war of bullets and bombs, and Israelis continue to die, and it's terrible. Thank God not as much as before. But I'm tired of dead Jews. Too many, Rahman al-Islam, the amount of Jews that have died for being Jewish for the past few thousand years, the numbers are staggering and earth-shattering, and it needs to stop. I'm tired of dead Jews. Having said that, Israel's main security battle today, I think, is primarily a war of words. I think it's a war of syllables and a war of paragraphs and a war of pages and blogs and books. And we are losing that battle. It's amazing that the one nation that has been trained, that has been given a biblical mandate to be a light unto the nations, to project its message, has done such a terrible job historically of projecting its message. How are the Jews perceived? Well, 2,000 years ago they said that we killed God. That's quite a charge, to say that one nation is so demonic that it can kill God. Well, after the death of Jesus, then we were accused of killing even Christian children and drinking their blood like vampires. And it's not like today where vampires are like really popular in Hollywood movies. We're talking about the worst kind of vampires, bloodsuckers who murdered children. We were accused of that. Then we were accused of poisoning the wells of Europe and killing 1/3 of the European population, being the biggest murderers in the history of the world, the bubonic plague, the Black Death. I mean, fast forward to the State of Israel, which is officially, according to a recent study, cited in the Jerusalem Post and other publications, as the second most hated country in the world. The most hated country in the world is North Korea. Second most hated is Israel. Third most hated is Iran. So here you have the Middle East's only democracy, bastion of human rights, freedom of religion, freedom of press, 1.5 million Arab citizens who not only vote but have their representatives in the Knesset, on the Israeli Supreme Court. Bastion of rights for gay men and women, and it's the second most hated country in the world. So how could you say we didn't lose the battle? The problem is that too many people excuse the loss of that verbal battle. They basically say that the world hates Israel and it's never going to understand it. That's a cop-out. That's an excuse. That is the poorest excuse. As I said before, if you're a communicator, you must take responsibility for failing to communicate. The relationship between President Obama and Prime Minister Netanyahu can always be stronger. But President Obama received high marks for his recent visit to Israel. People saw it as a restorative, reparative visit where he tried to strengthen ties. Now, President Obama said a lot of things that I don't agree with. He's anti-settlement. I'm a great champion of the communities in Yehuda and Shomron. I visited them just last week. Whenever I'm in Israel, I was in Hebron last week. Whenever I'm in Israel, I go to Shomron, I go to Yehuda. I believe that Jews should be allowed to live anywhere, just as the Arabs should be allowed to live anywhere. I'm totally opposed to making any place Yidden rein, God forbid. President Obama doesn't quite get that, and it's something that I have publicly criticized him for. But our president also deserves credit where credit is due. He went to Israel and he showed a lot of love for the Israeli people. He showed dedication to Israel's security, and I applaud him for that. I'm a great believer. Where criticism is warranted, you offer criticism. Where praise is warranted, you offer praise. An example is the recent, and you're asking about the United Nations in particular, and whether the United States will stand up for Israel at the UN when it comes to sanctions against Iran. Iran is a murderous, dictatorial, tyrannical regime. They are some of the mullahs in Iran are some of the most bloodthirsty people on earth. Not just against Jews, who they have threatened to wipe off the face of the earth. They want to kill 6 million more Jews in Israel, and they've threatened it multiple times. But they are bloodthirsty towards Muslims. Their treatment of Muslims is appalling. It's deplorable. Muslims and Arabs are my brothers. They are my sisters. They are my equals in every way as children of God. And I love the Arab peoples, and I love the Muslims as my brothers and sisters under one God. The only ones I don't love are those that have an unnatural hatred for me as a Jew. I've never hurt them, and I appeal to my Muslim brothers and sisters to open their hearts and embrace Israel as one of the great hopes for the Arab world. Israel is one of the great hopes for the Arab world. The success and flourishing of Israel is essential to Arab human rights. If Israel flourishes, if its democracy flourishes, if its economy flourishes, then all the Arabs who are currently being exterminated by Bashar al-Assad, one of the most wicked human beings of modern history, all those Arabs, the message will go out that they deserve to live in freedom the way Israeli Jews do and Israeli Arabs do. If Israel flourishes, survives, and prospers, then all the Arabs who did not get the democracy they thought they were getting under President Morsi of Egypt, who's becoming increasingly radical, Israel will be an example to them of the democracy they deserve. If Israel flourishes and survives, then the Islamic peoples of Turkey, who are under an increasing dictatorship of Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who is just increasing his control of the media every day, his control of, suppressing nonviolent protests. If Israel flourishes, then those people will also have an example that here in the Middle East, democracy can flourish. The success of Israel is essential to the freedom of the Arab peoples. And I want the Arab peoples to proclaim that we love Israel, that Israel wants to live with us in peace, that Israel has always respected Arab life, that Israel is not perfect, it has had to fight many wars, but its Arab citizens in the Jewish state are treated better, with more rights than any Arabs anywhere in the Middle East, period. And I want the Arabs to make that statement. But we have, I believe, there's been a lot of controversy, especially about Samantha Power being nominated as the United States ambassador to the United Nations. And a lot of the pro-Israel groups have come out against Samantha for a 2002 interview she did in Berkeley. Samantha's a close personal friend of mine. She's absolutely committed to Israel's security. She repudiated those comments in an on-the-record interview she did with me at the White House. I then invited her to a meeting of 40 Jewish leaders at the offices of my dear friend Michael Steinhardt, the founder of Birthright, where she allowed herself to be grilled by Jewish leaders who asked her very tough questions. She was very emotional about any charges that she's anti-Israel or, God forbid, anti-Semitic. It reached the point where she really could not continue her presentation. She became that deeply emotional. And that's not the reason why I think she's committed to Israel. The reason I think she's committed to Israel is that Samantha is the foremost agitator against genocide in the world. Her 2002 Pulitzer Prize winning book, A Problem from Hell, is all about the terrible atrocities of the 20th century and how the Western governments did almost nothing to stop it. And we Jews were the biggest victims of all. We suffered the worst of all genocides. We've seen genocides committed by the Turks in the Ottoman Empire, which still today is, any recognition of it is forbidden by Erdogan in Turkey. Then the Holocaust of the Jews, 6 million. And then Cambodia, 2.5 million, 75 to 78. That happened under Jimmy Carter, the great champion of human rights, the great critic of Israel, who watched the genocide happen under while he was the most powerful man on earth. 3 genocides under President Clinton, Rwanda being the worst, 800,000 dead between April and May of 1994. And Samantha's a great voice against that. And if all of her statements haven't been perfect, then our job in the Jewish community is to do our best to share with her our opinion and our protest at times. But her heart is definitely in the right place. And I think she's very committed to Israel's security. She's one of the principal reasons that, that the United States did not go to Durban 2, which would have been another Israel hate fest like Durban 1. Samantha's one of the principal reasons that the United States launched an air war against Muammar Gaddafi, who was absolutely committed to Israel's annihilation, and even more committed to his own Arab people's annihilation, an absolute murderer who owned the home immediately next door to the one where you're doing this interview, here in Englewood, New Jersey. As you walk outside, you'll see the Libyan flag flying there now. So these are things very close to my heart. And look, President Obama, I'm a Republican. I ran for Congress as a Republican. But President Obama has very good points when it comes to Israel, and he has points that I disagree with greatly. We need to be more balanced and measured in how we approach this administration, offering praise where it is warranted and offering criticism where it's warranted. Look, I do not know Israel's military offensive capabilities. If you ask me if Israel had the absolute offensive capabilities to remove the nuclear annihilation threat from Iran, that should it do it, then the answer seems pretty obvious. We Jews have learned from just 2 generations ago that we must rely on ourselves above all else when it comes to protecting ourselves. And I think that's what Israel's main raison d'etre is, protection of Jewish life by the Jews themselves. I have a daughter serving in the IDF, and we couldn't be more proud of her service. So if Israel has those offensive capabilities, and if it appears as though the United States is not going to take offensive action to stop Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, I think the answer is pretty straightforward, that Israel must do what it must do, what Menachem Begin did in Iraq with Saddam Hussein. But I don't know that Israel has those offensive capabilities. I keep on reading that they may not. I don't know. I'm not a military expert. And it's not my decision to make. But when people say, well, Shmuley, you're living here in the comfort of the United States, and it's easy for you to say that if Israel is going to be attacked by Iran, God forbid, in retaliation. Well, number one, I have a daughter who's serving in the IDF, so the risk is shared in this family. Number 2, I have so many other family members living in Israel. Number 3, Jews are now targets everywhere, as are Americans. If Iran were to retaliate against an Israeli strike, God forbid, or an American strike, they would retaliate in places like New York, and we've seen that, the terrible devastation that was wrought upon my American brothers and sisters, my fellow citizens, 3,000 innocent people whose only crime was to want to get up early and feed their families at the Twin Towers on September 11th, 2001. So you can be a target anywhere. And here in the US, we've seen schools that were targeted, JCCs that were targeted, shuls that are targeted. So Jews are targets everywhere. What the Israeli people need to communicate to the world is that their society is actually a model society. They've become so damaged by so much criticism that they've become defensive. They're always on the defensive. Like we have nothing to share with the world. The truth is that Israeli families have more children in the West than almost any society on earth. Israeli families are averaging about 3 children per family. That's amazing. Even in the US, we're at 2.1, 2.2. Of course, in places like France, Russia, Germany, there's no kids. They've reached what demographers call lowest low fertility. So they won't even replace their population in 75 years. That's why they're so dependent on immigrants. A lot of them are Muslim immigrants because the birth rate is so low. In France, you have a baby, they send you a maid for 2 years. That's how badly they want you to have a baby. In Australia, they pay you $5,000. My wife's Australian. I don't know why we left, because with 9 kids, thank God, we would have made $50,000. Here in the US, you don't get paid for babies. You barely get deductions because thank God the United States also values children. There's a lot of kids. But Israel is much more. 3 per family is the average. Among secular families, we're not talking about the Haredi world raising the numbers because of their large birth rate. We're talking about secular Israeli families. Israelis, whether religious or secular, love children. They're very dedicated to the family unit. There is no society on earth that values human life more than Israel. Rachmana litzlan, I mean, may God rescue us from this. Here in the United States, we see our soldiers, brave American boys and men and women, dying in Afghanistan to protect complete strangers. And they come home in coffins almost every day, and it barely makes a ripple. And it's a sad reflection on our society that so many brave Americans are dying and we don't mourn them sufficiently. And we have to do that here in America. We have to acknowledge their sacrifice. In Israel, 1 soldier dies, God forbid, 1 soldier, and the whole country is apoplectic. The country is in deep mourning. They so value that life. Look what they did with Gilad Shalit. Gilad Shalit, 1,000 killers released because of the value of that 1 Jewish brother Amazing. You know, I remember when Gilad Shalit was released, I was doing television about it, and some of the non-Jewish producers that I work with on CNN, MSNBC, Fox were saying to me, gosh, I wish I was part of a country that would be prepared to exchange 1,000 people for me. Wow, that makes you really feel like you're of infinite value, and that's Israel. And Israel has to export those values to the rest of the world, and do so proudly. And that's how you counter so much of the criticism. You counter the criticism not just by defending every last action. You know, Israel's accused of this. Let me tell you the truth about what happened. Israel's accused of destroying a house. Let me tell you what really happened. Israel's accused. It's the larger message of the wondrous values of this society that should serve as a light and a beacon to the rest of the world, and have its values illuminate the dark spaces of the earth.